Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. I am Bisi Adibayo. Coming up on today's show, Nigeria's inflation climbs further to 13.71% in September. IMF projects $28 trillion COVID-19 losses in the next 5 years. And Zimbabwe to introduce $50 note to double cash in circulation to $3 billion. Well, let's begin the show right away with the major markets in Africa, which were mostly positive at intraday, except for South Africa's GSE, which declined 1.55%. Nigeria's main index rebounded, although marginally, by 0.06%. The EGX30 in Egypt was also in positive territory by 0.19%, and Kenya closed negative on Wednesday. And investor sentiments were sour in the Middle East as all the major markets we track were in the red. Dubai's main index declined the most by 1.06%, while Abu Dhabi's index was 0.41% lower. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia's index lost 0.48%, while the Qatari index shaved off 0.27%. And in Europe, stocks fell sharply today as hopes fade that a U.S. stimulus package will be agreed before the November election and as restrictions return across Europe due to a surge in coronavirus infections. Let's get more details from Chelsea Delaney. Good afternoon, Chelsea. We've seen stocks in Frankfurt lead in the sell-offs across Europe as Germany reports a record number of new coronavirus cases. But what's the latest on new restrictions being put in place in Europe?
Basically, every country in Europe right now is coming forward with some sort of new restrictions that will have a significant impact on different industries and different parts of the economy. So this risk is becoming very real to investors now. We are in the second wave, and that will impact the financial situation of many companies, many people. As you can see behind me, the DAX has just been really getting battered today. It's down about 3% right now, and we're seeing particularly big declines for some of the auto stocks here, like Volkswagen, Daimler, down about 5% right now. So clearly there is a lot of angst and a lot of anxiety about these new restrictions. A lot of what we're seeing right now is governments really trying to implement very narrow, localized measures. So we've seen here in Germany, federal states yesterday agreeing to new rules on broader wearing of masks, more restrictions on the number of people you're allowed to come in contact to, more curfew restrictions. But what we also are hearing from these politicians is that they very much still want to avoid a second nationwide lockdown. They want to really keep this as narrow as possible because the European economy is still very fragile. Many countries have already really spent to about the limit of what they can to support the economy. So even Germany, which has been very well positioned financially, we heard from Chancellor Angela Merkel yesterday that she's also quite concerned that Germany would be able to find the money to really support the economy like it has been doing for much longer. So right now we still are seeing localized restrictions, but whether countries will be able to maintain these, whether they will be able to avoid a second lockdown is really going to depend on how well these restrictions do in containing the virus over the next couple of weeks.
And many are waiting to see how all of that plays out. Now, another issue on the radar today is that of Brexit. Of course, the EU leaders are meeting in Brussels today, and that is at the top of the agenda. But what's the EU's position heading into these negotiations?
The EU isn't expecting to reach a deal today or tomorrow. The summit will conclude tomorrow. What we've heard over the past couple of days is that the EU and the UK want to keep negotiating. Initially, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson had threatened to walk away from these talks today to basically leave this transition period that expires at the end of the year with no deal if it didn't appear that they were getting closer. They aren't getting closer, but he has walked back that threat. So we could potentially see a couple more weeks of negotiations because both sides recognize how important it is for these economies to strike a deal. The EU is really going to be focusing and sort of regrouping right now to see where and what they would be willing to negotiate on. There's been a couple sticking points, particularly the rights of EU fisheries to fish in UK waters. That's been a very big issue, and we've seen Germany try to push France, which has taken a very hardline approach to sort of soften its stance. So it does appear that they are trying to look at where they could be negotiating in the next couple of weeks. But we've also heard that they would be willing to walk away from these negotiations if it looks like they're going to get a bad deal. So both sides are still, to some degree, playing a bit of hardball, but it does appear that there will be a little bit more time to negotiate this Brexit deal.
And finally, Chelsea, France and the Netherlands are pushing the EU to try to break up US tech giants amid rising concerns about their power. Is that actually a possibility?
It's a slim possibility. France and the Netherlands, and really the broader EU, do want to have stricter regulations for American tech giants. And it's really not just the EU. The United States is also looking at ways that it can be a stricter regulator of that industry because of all of the concerns over monopoly power and sort of the way we've seen this impact society, elections, data, all of that. Has really become a very politicized issue. But the EU is already in the process of strengthening its regulatory powers for big tech. It's looking at a new Digital Services Act that would allow it to basically crack down on these tech platforms in terms of things like misinformation. They would really like to strictly regulate that. They would also like to give people and the users of these platforms more power over their own data. But what we've heard from France and the Netherlands is certainly a step further. Potentially breaking up these companies is politically and legally a bit of a challenge. It's not clear if they would be able to have the authority to do that. But it's also really a last step. If these other efforts don't work, if these other regulatory powers don't really achieve the desired results, that's really the last resort that they would potentially resort to.
Thank you, Chelsea. We'll see you again tomorrow. Well, let's turn to London to see how the markets are reacting to the latest COVID-19 restrictions coming into effect. And Juliana Olayinka will be telling us how all of that is going. Good afternoon, Juliana. Well, you spoke to Chime about the tighter COVID-19 restrictions coming into effect in London from Friday night as infection rates continue to increase. What more can you tell us about this development? And are we getting any reactions yet?
But of course, there's lots of reaction, really, and that can be summed up in two words: anger and confusion. A lot of people are very, very angry at the fact that these new restrictions are taking place in London. We always thought that they would be happening. I actually spoke on the channel yesterday about it, considering that Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London, has been edging towards this. Of course, on Monday, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced this three-tier lockdown measure in London. At the moment, we're all living under the medium, well, millions of people across the country are living under the medium tier, which is the rule of 6 and this curfew. But now from Saturday morning, London will be lifted into the high alert tier, which means there is no longer a mix between people from different households. It is slightly confusing because there are some options and there are some differences in where you can mix with other people. But this really affects the hospitality sector. We've been speaking about this for months, just how difficult it's been for them, even during the August Eat Out to Help Out scheme. We saw those GDP numbers last week. It just didn't match up. The consumer confidence really isn't there, and there are concerns and worries. So basically now what these new restrictions mean for London is that you cannot go outside for a coffee with a friend or a colleague. You can no longer go to restaurants with people from other households. You can only stay in your household bubble. But if you're outside, so if a restaurant has an outside or a beer garden, which is what they call them here in England, you can do that. So it is incredibly confusing. But the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, did outline these measures. He says that coronavirus is spreading out of control here in the capital city of about 9.3 million people. I believe at the moment there are about 90 to 100 infected COVID-19 people per 100,000 people. That's well above the threshold. In the summer, I believe London or the rest of the UK was down to about 12.2 per 100,000 people. So you can see how the trajectory is going. It's rapidly increasing. But some are saying if you're going to do this, you may as well do a full lockdown. There's no point, ironing out this agony, prolonging this agony for 6 or 7 months. Just lock the entire nation down for 2 or 3 weeks so we can come back and re-emerge much better. That's the discussion. And of course, that was what Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour opposition leader, said in his televised address on Tuesday. So it's all, it's all a big story here in Britain at the moment. Of course, there are already pockets of the country living under this restriction, but London, being the capital city, everybody's talking about it. And I've got to tell you, the overwhelming reaction is people are not happy. They don't think that there's enough scientific evidence to back up such a severe lockdown.
And more fallouts from the restrictions now, talking about pub and brewery group Martins saying that it will axe up to 2,150 furloughed jobs following new restrictions to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Are we likely to see more businesses follow this footsteps in the coming days and weeks?
Well, of course, absolutely. That's what we're seeing. That's what the statistics are showing, that more jobs are going to go. We had the unemployment data, didn't we, showing that unemployment in this country has risen to 4.5%. I believe 1.2 million people are currently unemployed in this country. Historically, still very low. Internationally, still very low. But we haven't seen the end of this. The furlough scheme is coming to an end at the end of October. But it's these new curfews that's the issue. And with Marston Group, I believe they have about 14,000 staff here in the UK. They've got about 1,400 pubs. For them, they just don't believe it's going to be viable to keep all of their staff employed when you've got these 10 p.m. curfews. And now in several parts of the country, people from different households cannot mix when they're in the hospitality sector. They just believe that's the nail in the coffin, so they're letting 2,000 jobs go. We've seen other chains over the past couple of months letting people go. We are expecting more and more of this. A lot of hospitality sector individuals are not happy. I think a lot of people are still chewing over the announcement made this morning about London. So I do expect, especially the Michelin star chains and those with a little bit of purchasing power in their pocket, they will be taking the government to task here. There have been legal actions being threatened. Some say that, they will be taking the government to court because the scientific evidence is not there. And the hospitality sector, Marston included, do believe that the government are unfairly putting the hospitality sector to carry the brunt of the losses when statistically we're not seeing that COVID-19 is spreading in pubs and in restaurants. So there's a lot to answer for Boris Johnson. But yes, as you said, Marston Group, really huge pub chain in the UK, have announced these job losses or these redundancies of over 2,000 staff.
All right, Juliana, just before you go, in less than a minute, can you run us through how the currencies and equities markets are performing at intraday?
As expected, not great. Triple-digit losses on the FTSE. It started off in the red and it's firmly in the red. As you spoke to Chelsea, it's Brexit and, of course, these new lockdown restrictions. The FTSE all shares down 2.16%. The FTSE 100 is down 2.28% and the FTSE 250 is down by 1.87%. Also a down day for the British pound, down on the US dollar by 0.44%, down on the euro by 0.21% and down on the Japanese yen by 0.37% at intraday.
Thank you, Juliana. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
We'll be talking commodities when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us. Nigerian ice cream market has been growing by leaps and bounds with a growth of 8.52% in 2018. The major consumers are in the demography of the age 15 to 35, but with the rising health consciousness of Nigerians and a growing shift to healthy foods, what's the future of this industry? A research analyst at the financial derivatives company Shakirat Adigun joins us now to answer this question and more. Good afternoon, Shakirat. It's good to have you on the program. I don't know, I can see you wearing a long face. Is the NSAS protest in any way getting to you?
Quite a bit.
I can only imagine there. But let's get straight into business now. But do you think the ice cream industry can survive this threat owing to the fact that people are getting more and more health conscious?
Okay, so yes, the ice cream industry is actually growing in Nigeria, and this is because everyone loves ice cream. Ice cream is sweet, it's creamy, and it's cold. I mean, in Nigeria, that's hot. Who doesn't want a cold treat, yeah? But now, on the other hand, if you look at it, many people are concerned about their health. If knowing that ice cream has high content of calories, fats, and sugar, and consuming too much of this would actually could lead to weight gain, or it could affect their health in one way or the other. And ice cream companies are actually aware of this, and they've tried to look for ways to solve this issue. They've created a variety of ice cream that's like low in calories, low in sugar, and low in fat, so that those who are trying to watch their weight would be able to, and those who are trying to cut down on calories would be able to. So yes, I think that we can actually survive these threats since now there's a variety of ice cream that everyone who loves ice cream can take.
And everyone surely loves ice cream. Now, ice cream is a product of the dairy industry with milk as a major ingredient. And the CBN has recently prohibited the importation of dairy products in order to encourage local production. Could this also be a threat to the production, sustainability, and even the ice cream or the price of ice cream in Nigeria?
Importation. Nigeria has spent billions of dollars on importing dairy products, and if you look at how we consume dairy products in Nigeria, it's very low, and this is because Nigerians believe that dairy products are not they're not priority. They're not priority. They're a luxury, let's put it that way. So they put priority more to staple foods like rice, beans, and yam. So if we're to look at that, it's not the way we produce, the capacity in which Nigeria produces produces dairy products is very little compared to even the low demand for this product. So I would say that the CBN bringing the ban to the importation is good, because it's a good step in a way for producing or encouraging local production of milk. And then if in the long run it can make Nigeria more self-sufficient in the production of milk, and as we're more self-sufficient, I believe that the price of milk would later drop, and it would influence the price of ice cream later on.
Now, in terms of preserving ice cream now, it has to be refrigerated, and this is dependent on power supply. So when you look at the erratic nature of power supply in the country, how is it likely to affect the demand, the consumption, and the production in Nigeria?
The production of ice cream is largely dependent on power supply, and Nigeria is not reliable on this because power supply isn't sufficient enough in the country. So, and nobody can take a melted ice cream. Everyone loves ice cream frozen. At least that's the only way it's palatable. So if ice cream companies have to make ice cream, they have to use power. And if there is no power, they would have to spend money on fueling generators and even buying generators. This will lead to increase in cost of production, and it will affect the price of ice cream.
Research analyst at the FDC, Shakirat Adigun, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts with us. I think you should grab a cup of ice cream. That will probably brighten up your day. Thank you for speaking with us. And Nigeria's inflation continued its upward trend in September, rising to 13.71%, and that's 0.49 percentage points higher than the 13.22% recorded in August. According to latest data released by the National Bureau of Statistics today, core food index rose by 16.66%, majorly driven by increases in the price of food items. Core inflation also maintained a steady rise to 10.58%, marginally from the 10.52% reported in August. Urban inflation rose to 14.31% year-on-year, and rural inflation hit 13.14%. Meanwhile, inflation was highest in Bauchi, Zamfara, and Kogi, with Lagos, Abuja, and Kwara recording the lowest in September. The managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, says the crisis from COVID-19 can lead to a global loss of $28 trillion in the next 5 years. Ms. Georgieva, who made this known during her opening remarks at the IMF World Bank Annual General Meeting, explains that the picture over the last few months has become less dire, and the fund continues to project the worst global recession since the Great Depression. At the same time, the IMF sees unprecedented efforts in vaccine development and extraordinary coordinated fiscal and monetary measures putting a floor under the world economy. According to the IMF boss, while there is tremendous uncertainty around forecasts, the fund projects a partial and uneven recovery in 2021, with growth expected at 5.2%. And Zimbabwe is set to introduce a $50 note in an endeavor to double the cash in circulation to $3 billion. This follows the market's projection of the $2, $5, $10, and $20 notes, which are set to be tiny considering the inflation in the country. Some Zimbabweans say the $50 note is still too small, urging the government to introduce $200 or $500, or half the two of the highest denominations, to afford a loaf of bread. And that's where we end today's program. Thank you for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.